Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. In a world today where everybody's trying to reverse aging, you've got anti-aging messages, everybody out there is promising you the next fountain of youth. We try to find ways that we can stave off disease, stay healthy, and be sure that we can remain forever young. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a wonderful story that I understand is going to probably break through some of the paradigms that we see out there when we see superficial products, superficial food, most importantly, superficial promises. I'd like to welcome to the program today someone who's going to present a thing called Longevity Now. It's a 5-part breakthrough system to super immunity. After all, as we get older, maybe the aches and pains kind of sit there on the horizon, but they don't have to be there. Colds, sniffles, things like headaches, maybe even things like fevers can certainly not even have to even bother us as we age. I'd like to welcome to the program David Avocado Wolfe to talk with us about the 5-part breakthrough system to super immunity. And David Wolfe, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be on the show, and we've got some very cutting-edge, groundbreaking information to share.
Now, it's interesting you put it that way because we tend to hear that a lot. So what's different about what people are about to experience today?
Well, I come from a background, both of my parents are medical doctors. In fact, when I was born, my mom did a half day at the office on the way home. So I literally made it to the office, the doctor's office, before I even made it home. And I've been kind of, I guess, genetically predestined for medical research. And even though my field has been nutrition, and I do believe that the best medicine is the best nutrition, really what I've been doing with the Longevity Now program is bridging a lot of medical research into the natural food and herbal world and energy medicine world, and the conclusions are startling. They are amazing, and they're definitely something that no one has ever heard of before. I can tell you that.
Okay, good. Well, that's what we're going to hear about today. Now, let's talk about your story and what put you on this particular path.
Well, it comes from two different directions. When I was a child, I always had an extreme love for wild places and undeveloped terrain, and spent a lot of time as a kid, on dunes, beaches, forests, and things, far away from civilization. And we're so lucky as Americans to have access to wild places. I was in the UK last year, and there are no wild places left. Everything has been developed, cut down, changed. It's not. There's no natural energies left. So that's part of my personality and character. The other side of it is that when I was about 18, I started realizing that I had food allergies. A lot of people have food allergies but don't identify their symptoms as food allergies. And luckily I did by a few hot tips that I had, and that led me into changing my diet around, and eventually took a hobby, which was nutrition, and turned it into a vocation and a career.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we talk about, food today is just such at times it's a daunting subject just because everybody seems to have a cookbook, everybody seems to have a way that we should be eating, and every which way it seems that it's become such a confusing issue about diet. You ask anybody about diet and they associate it with a thing such as losing weight, but in fact what diet truly means, it's what you eat. Now let's talk about all the confusion and what you're about to present to us that really is going to be cutting edge and different.
Okay, well, the confusion probably, we don't want to even belabor that point because it's self-evident.
Isn't that true?
We don't even want to go there. What we want to do is we want to take our operating systems, which our diet and lifestyles, and we're operating under certain knowledge. We're operating under certain systems, and these are metaphorically similar to an operating system on a computer. And what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade. We're going to upgrade to an operating system that's more user-friendly and that delivers the goals that we want easier. And that's something that no one's going to say no to. Let me give you an example. Vitamin and mineral supplements. We know that we are missing valuable vitamins and minerals in our food and a whole lot of other stuff. I'm not a big fan of vitamin and mineral supplements because I want to get everything from my food. How do we do that, and how do we enjoy doing that? And that's where the superfood and super herb revolution comes in, where we have now identified through our cross-referencing of the great herbal systems of the world the most powerful things in Chinese medicine, the most powerful things in Ayurvedic medicine out of India, the most powerful things out of European folk herbalism, and we don't need to eat a million things. Let's just focus on the top things and add them in. That's the key distinction. There is no taking away anymore. We're not going to get into more denial and judgment. We're just going to add in the good stuff and let that run its course.
Mm-hmm. Now, and that's it's interesting because I've been able to, over the course of many years of doing radio, is you hear promises and things from people, and then you see the direction that, for instance, our food staple here in America has gone. And you take a look at, for instance, the influence of corn. We grow so much of it that it's basically infused into just about almost anything that we eat. And finding out that the onset of things such as diabetes, cancer, disease, you name it, it runs the gamut. So it's almost as though the food production that we have here in this country really makes this country sick, and it becomes that cycle that now the next thing you know, you're going to the doctor, you're being prescribed drugs, and before you know it, you're kind of hooked into the rat that's running around the wheel sort of a thing. Now let's talk about what superfoods are and how it stands apart from what we typically see in the supermarket.
Well, superfoods are time-proven foods that have been consumed by the greatest civilizations in the world, and they're really the gifts that those civilizations have left behind. When we think of the Egyptians and the great civilization that had been there, obviously the ruins speak for themselves, but what we don't normally hear is that they gifted us aloe vera. Aloe vera came to the world from Egypt, and this is their great superfood that they had isolated out of the natural world, right, that it was a wild food originally, and then had brought it to its cultivation point where now, we can get all kinds of aloe products all over the world, and the Egyptians gifted us that. So aloe is a superfood. The Polynesians gave us noni. The Incan people gave us maca. The Mexican civilization, the ancient Aztec, Mayan, Toltec, Olmec civilizations from Mexico gave us chocolate or raw cacao, the original food that all chocolate is made out of. So these are not so much exotic things. These are things that are very well known for a very long time, and we don't need food number 508 on the list. We need food number 1. That's, right? Because we don't need so much. Well, let's just go for the number 1 thing, and we just add it in. And the great thing about that is it's innovative, it's novel, the flavors are unique, it's fun. It hits every button, and it's like pretty much when we get onto superfood drinks, like just blending superfoods into smoothies instead of the protein powder, it's something that anyone can access, and it causes immediate changes. And that right there, just the fact that somebody can be turned on by the information that's in the food immediately gets us out of the confusion and begins to get us into tapping into the wisdom of these great foods.
Mm-hmm. So basically what it comes down to, it sounds like, David, is let's keep it simple.
Totally, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about how we keep it simple that way, because again, I remember, and this is totally true, this was probably back in the early 90s, I just became so frustrated about everything that I was reading about, everything I was hearing about, or anything I was seeing. Okay, when it came to diet, I said, there's got to be a simpler way to look at all this, because it was like, somebody telling a dog, come over here, but then somebody else will say, no, come over here. Before you know it, you got 30 people all telling this dog to go one direction. It just doesn't know which way to go. So I go to the library, and I go ahead and I just punch in diet. Okay, the next thing you know, you've got over 400 books in the library, but I decided I'm just going to scroll through each one, find the one that to me is going to give me the essence of getting back to basics. And certainly I found one that was actually a really fascinating book called Diet, Nutrition, A Holistic Approach. And it took all the confusion away from all the messages that I was hearing out there. So what I'd like you to do for our listeners is let's get back to basics and go step by step so people say, that to me just makes a lot of sense.
Okay, well, one of the things that we know is that the chemicals that are, so we're getting out of the diet, argument. There, some people say, oh, you've got to eat this or that. Let's get back to even more basic than that. The chemicals and the fertilizers, the slag that we call fertilizer that's used to grow a lot of the conventional food today is toxic, is dangerous. The jury is in that food has lower mineral and vitamin content and also a whole bunch of other stuff than, say, natural wild foods and or organic foods. So as a preference, we should all be looking at organic food more. just based on the research. Organic food can have anywhere from 10% more nutrients to 200% more nutrients, in some cases 500%, which means it can have 5 times the amount of a certain mineral like magnesium. So we're going to find, in general, on average, more value, more bang for our buck with organic food. So I start there. Second piece of this is, okay, let's say we're taking vitamin and mineral supplements, but we're unsure of their efficacy, and we're spending a certain amount of money on that per month. Let's say it's $100. Well, take that $100 and throw it into Superfoods, and that way you can really get your vitamins and minerals and everything that has not been found in food, that is not even in supplements, still in their natural state. For example, we've identified about 1,000 things that are in food, but it's been estimated that there's probably 2,000 different types of unique chemicals that could be in food. This is a very cursory way of looking at it. Therefore, only half of what has been discovered could even show up in a supplement because we don't even know what the other half is. I don't even want to get into that game. We want to bypass that completely. We just want to go to the foods where we know the vitamins and minerals are still there. It's time-tested, complete protein sources, complete essential fatty acid sources, etc. And that way we're getting all those goodies without having to worry about vitamin and mineral supplements. Okay, so that's step 2. Okay. Step 3 is we look at our habits. What do we know that we're going to do, and what do we know we're never going to do? And we work with our habits instead of against them.
I just think that's funny. What do we know we're going to do, and what do we know we're not going to do? And it's amazing. Most people do the things they shouldn't be doing in the first place.
Totally. And then trying to battle yourself with doing, like juicing. I love drinking fresh vegetable juices, fresh juices of all kinds. But there's no way in the world that I'm going to clean the juicer. Mm-hmm. Right, so I know I'm not going to do that. So if I go to a health food store, yeah, please make me a juice. But at home, it's not happening. So, those kinds of things, finding out what we will do and what we won't do. Now, I believe that each person is endowed, based on what they will do and what they won't do, with a capacity to develop great health based on their own unique characteristics of discipline. And people say, no, I don't have discipline. What are you talking about? And it's like, well, you brushed your teeth every day since you were 3 years old. You've got some discipline for sure. Mm-hmm.
Now, when we talk about, for instance, vitamins, minerals, protein, carbohydrates, sweeteners, now there's an area, too, that you take a look at the diet gurus out there, and they try to separate those. For instance, you have the no-carbohydrate diet, and then the next thing you know, well, it's the low-protein diet. And it just goes on to where they separate. They try to say one is better than all of it. Putting it together, you've got food combining, you got a bunch of mixed messages there. Let's go ahead and talk about that. And is it important to break it up, or what is it that we really need there?
Okay, well, from a metabolism standpoint, and we all differ in metabolism, sometimes slightly, sometimes greatly. Some of us need higher protein, some of us need lower protein. Some of us need more carbohydrates. Now I'm talking about ratios. I'm not talking about amount, but a ratio. So when we're dealing with carbohydrates, protein, and fats and oils, we're talking about ratios of these things to each other. So in the general ratio of how somebody eats, for example, throughout a day, some people require more carbohydrates as compared to everything else. Some people require more fats and oils, and some people require more protein. When we figure out what that ratio is for our body, a unique metamorphosis occurs, and that is we are able to produce more energy. Mm-hmm. And that is why, this is why you will have books that say low carbohydrates better. Other books will say high carbohydrates are better. It's all over the board. It's because we do differ in that way. And for some people, it's correct information. For some people, it's really not good information because, if somebody needs high protein but they're on a high carbohydrate diet, it can really throw them off.
Mm-hmm. So how does a person, should they go be tested to find out what's good for them, or where can we put the common sense here?
You can do that. Doctors can test you and see how your blood sugar reacts by your morning blood sugar, for example. Let's say you eat a ton of protein, and then we can see where your blood sugar is 4 hours later, 8 hours later, et cetera, and determine where you fit in. So that can be done medically or through a trained lab scientist and nutritionist. However, we can always figure it out for ourselves, and the easy way to do that is, let's say we get up in the morning and, our normal breakfast is whatever. We just forget that, and we just eat only sweet fruit in the morning. Mm-hmm. Now, if we find out that within an hour that we are ravenously hungry, we don't have any energy, and we're craving something really heavy and solid, then probably we're not a carbohydrate burner. We're probably the type of person who needs fat and or protein in the morning or throughout the day in general as the type of main fuel, calorie fuel for our body. My body personally, I did that, that test with carbohydrates. The next day I tested out protein. So I would take something in like, I really like spirulina, which is one of the highest protein content foods in the world. I'd drink that in the morning, and I determined where was my energy, and then the next day I would eat only nuts and avocados in the morning and find out where my energy was. What I found out was that my energy was most stable and my blood sugar most stable if I ate fat in the morning and even throughout the day as my primary calorie source. Mm-hmm. That's me. So I found out for me I need high fat, moderate to low protein, moderate to low carbohydrate. If I violate that ratio, I don't have the same energy and I start going out of balance. We each of us, it's up to us to find out where we fit in on all this. Now, I will say this. Most people, over at least 60% of the population, I think it's actually more than that, are fat and or protein burners for calories, for energy. And therefore, probably it's better to have more fat and or protein in your diet for stability of metabolism and blood sugar than not to.
It's interesting you bring up fat because that's one of the biggest, you might even call it, prejudices that we have here in America. You bring up, remove the fat out of your diet, but it's funny how we've confused the elements of nutrition in such a way that you can almost turn fat into an enemy. Now let's talk about sources of protein, what the best are when you talk about superfoods to get your protein from, fats as well, and then we go on with the sugars and things like that.
Like what are some of the best sources is what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah, okay, so when it comes to protein, obviously like lean meat protein and fish, these are higher protein sources. Most meat on the market, for example, beef, et cetera, is really high in fat. And generally people who like beef, they like fat, not really protein. Fish, people who are fish eaters need a high protein diet. Now, if we're going to upgrade, and let's say we were a vegetarian or we wanted to upgrade to like really high quality protein, the best sources of protein are actually superfoods. They're 100% bioavailable. They're already in a powdered form in most cases. They're completely natural, and even something as simple as a goji berry, which is the top gift that Chinese medicine has given us, is actually a complete protein source, and you really do feel that. Hemp seed protein, a phenomenal protein source. And most of us, I believe, in our country now are trying to get more of their calories and more of their protein from cleaner sources, and superfoods kind of solves that problem. Now, when we go to fats and oils, raw nuts are great. They're not as good as raw seeds. For example, pumpkin seeds or hemp seeds. These are also great sources of fat. And, chia seeds, flax seeds, etc. And then avocados and olives and olive oil and the different types of seed oils that are out there, from evening primrose oil to flax oil. These are great sources of places to get raw, clean fat. Now, if we want to go to carbohydrates, some of the best carbohydrates that are out there right now are kind of moderately sweet berries. It's berry season right now. And that's a great food if you want to get your carbohydrates from a natural source and, have something that's seasonal as well.
Mm-hmm. See, that's what's interesting when you say carbohydrates from a natural source. Take a look at the carbohydrate diet. Let's eliminate carbohydrates altogether. And having worked in the restaurant business, it's interesting how people come in and they just get real frustrated, when they look over the menu and say, what can I have? And then you realize, well, they're on one of these specialty diets. So you say to them, okay, well, let's take a look. What is it that you're trying to do? The next thing you know, you rattle off a couple solutions, and they get excited. So at first they looked as though they hated to eat, but because they were stuck on this strict regimen that they were told would actually help them achieve whatever goal they had. And you say, well, you could do all these things, and they light up and didn't realize they had so many choices in front of them. And one of the things that I would talk with them about is, okay, you're on one of these low-carbohydrate diets. Did you realize that what that really means is processed carbohydrates, things such as bread and the like? And you're talking about getting natural carbohydrate sources within, its natural state. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that people get so confused and frustrated about all the diet messages they hear out there is because they're not really as specific as they should be. So people say, okay, that just makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the diet and nutrition world is a very important area to be very clear about, and to give people as much education and as much tools as we can. But we've always got to keep it simple. That is so important because I'm a nutritionist by trade. So I'm knee deep, I'm neck deep into it. I'm going to get all the way.
I think you need scuba equipment, actually.
Totally. I mean, it's ridiculous. Where I'm at with my sophistication in that area is nowhere near where somebody who is focused on whatever business or whatever they're doing. So what we need to do is we need to chunk it down to the simplest possible steps that anybody can do right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's go ahead and talk about, as people are approaching midlife, obviously they kind of relegate themselves to the idea that immunity systems break down. And from what I understand, you've been somebody who's built sort of a super immunity through your nutritional projections that you talk about here. Let's talk about what people can do right now to immediately boost their immunity, to really regain what I would like to consider to be cellular health, because that's really what we're talking about.
Exactly. It's anybody who's really been studying cancer or any of the conditions that are afflicting Western civilization at this point realizes, I believe, if they really look at it honestly, that it's all coming down to the immune system. And therefore, we've got to find out, okay, what botanicals are available to everybody that immediately influence and improve the immune system and can create actual permanent changes in the immune system. And asking that question leads to this answer. It's the medicinal mushrooms. These are mushrooms that naturally grow on trees. They've been used herbally for at least 5,000 years that we know of, probably longer. And the most famous of them, reishi mushroom, is one of the most well-studied herbs in the world. I mean, there's so much research that's been done on that particular botanical herbal substance. It's outrageous. And reishi mushroom powders and extracts and products are available in every health food store and even non-health food stores all over the Western world.
Now, just hold on for a minute, David. How do you spell the word reishi?
Okay, it's spelled R-E-I-S-H-I.
Okay. Go ahead.
Then once we get going on reishi mushroom, and this is what I hear from people who've been taking reishi mushroom for about 15 years. You get immediate changes in your body right away and in your immune system, but eventually what it really does for you is it creates a sense and feeling of well-being that is probably unmatched in the entire food and herbal kingdom. Once we get to that level and we're like, okay, well, is there anything more I can do? Are there other medicinal mushrooms that I could take that would make my immunity even better? And the answer is, of course, yes. And that's where we start stepping into maitake, which is a very famous medicinal mushroom, M-A-I-T-A-K-E. Shiitake, which has been used in restaurants as well as in herbal pharmacopoeias for thousands of years. Shiitake is spelled S-H-I-I-T-A-K-E. And then some of the common mushrooms that we find in the forest called Coriolis. Coriolis is found in all 50 states. It's found in every forest. And there are certain specific polysaccharides, that's really where the action is in these mushrooms. That's where the interesting intelligence is. There's a certain group of polysaccharides called polysaccharide K that comes out of Coriolis. It's a very powerful anti-cancer medicine and has been used against cancer since the beginning of Western civilization.
Fascinating. That's something you don't hear too much about, especially in the diet messages, is mushrooms. Apparently Alice in Wonderland was right.
Yes. I was on with John Assaraf, The Secret, the other day, and he said, "Are you talking about magic mushrooms?" And I was like, "No, I'm not talking about that."
They become magic just due to what they actually give you.
Yeah, and it is. They are magic because the mushroom kingdom has always been associated with children, fairies, elves, magic, enchantment. And how do we get some of that energy coming in? Well, we have to actually consume some of these things. Well, let's consume the ones that are the most tested, that have the most history, and that we know work for the most people.
Mm-hmm. You know, and here's something that's alarming too, David, and I'm sure you've encountered this as you've been out. I understand, you know, you do talks and seminars and lectures and the like, is our young today. I'd never even imagined when I was young ever saying, I just feel tired. And you hear this message constantly from teenagers. You hear it from, you know, kids that are as early as 8, 10 years old. You know, I just feel tired today. And you're wondering, what is it that's making them so tired?
You know, this is one of my favorite little quips and anecdotes that I put into my presentations, and that is every spiritual book agrees on one thing, and that is that we're an energy field.
Right.
You know, first and foremost, we're an energy field. How in the world can an energy field be out of energy? And the answer is that we have gummed up this energy field with every kind of processed stuff possible, right? From, you know, my God, you know, I grew up, I actually ate Twinkies in my life. Mm-hmm. I ate all kinds of these, you know, crazy cupcake things and donuts and all this other kind of stuff. And when we take that kind of a habit to an extreme, which happens in kids because they don't know any better, what can happen is that we can start seeing problems with energy even as low as 8 years old, you know, where it used to take until somebody was 50. And this is, you know, it's alarming, but it's kind of good that it's happening because it's waking kids up early. And I've seen a tremendous explosion of youth in their interest in what I'm doing in the last 5 years. I mean, 13-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds that will actually, you know, are dragging their parents, you know, to the health food store, you know, are really into it. It's really amazing, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let's talk about the best way a person right now as they listen to this show, how they can get started by evaluating what their eating habits are and that they can incorporate new changes. Now, that's the hard part because that's why people tend to fail in diets is they just, maybe it's too strict or they just don't stick with it, something triggers and they just fall back to what they were, and before you know it, their goals just become dreams, and before you know it, those even become frustrations. So what is the easiest way that we can incorporate a new change in our life when it comes to diet?
Well, I think number one is putting our money where our mouth is. You know, that phrase, everybody knows that phrase. But it's amazing how when you really hear it and you really think about it, you go, whoa, what is actually encoded in that phrase? One of the things that derails people, at least as much as anything else, is the whole thing about the change in, like you go and get reishi mushroom supplements, it's $30. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a little bit different than the old model. I will say this, that, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You remember that whole thing. Right. If I grew up in the hospital environment, I grew up in a doctor's office, I know what happens at the end of people's lives, and I know how much money it takes to deal with the hospital bills and the doctor bills and the x-ray bills and all this kind of stuff. If you don't act now, and if you don't pay now, you'll definitely pay later, and it's going to be a lot more later. So that first piece is really getting our values sorted so that we are capable, willing, and able to put money into our body. You know, to go out, get the food, pay the extra money, and do what it takes. When we do that, it's actually a values correction. We're just correcting what our values are and really valuing what's important, which is, you know, you are what you eat is not going to be bypassed by something that we're going to figure out in the next few years. I can tell you that. You know, and you bring up an interesting point there, David, about how people don't really put their money where their mouth is. I think all of us, as we approach midlife, have probably experimented with one network marketing company after another, and a good predominant market share of that industry is based on health supplements, you know, a way that you can get the kind of nutrition that you're not normally getting into your body. So as you were saying when you were talking about the reishi mushroom, and you can get this at a health food store, it's going to cost you about $30, probably last you for about a month. I'm not really sure about that, but let's just pretend, you know, in that particular paradigm that that's what it is. Yep. Ooh, $30. After a while, people start balking at this. You know, they'd rather spend $30 or $40 on a carton of cigarettes than they would about improving their health, but they think they want to improve their health, and that's where the interesting paradox becomes. Absolutely, and it is a huge derailing energy, is this thing of not really being committed to putting money into our food and our nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I start first. And beyond that, I would really recommend that for everybody, you look at your overall lifestyle, and you go, okay, here's what I can do. Here's a change I can make. And we get back to this thing of doing what you can do instead of what you think you can do,
mm-hmm.
which is those are very different things. And another thing, too, is getting to the point with food where we're having fun again,
right.
where it's fun and it's entertaining. That's what I love about superfoods. That's what I love about reishi mushroom and the super herbs in the world, is they bring an entertainment back. They bring a mythology and lore. And, when I do a presentation, what I'm doing is I'm presenting the legends and lore and mythology and scientific background about these great foods. But what's different than what I do than, say, going to a movie on a Saturday night is that you get to eat the food right there and feel it for yourself. You can't eat a movie on a Saturday night. But you can eat the food. And that to me is a really cool area of entertainment, and that's why I've niched myself in there, because it's a great way to spend a Saturday night. Come out and see a presentation about some food. I'm showing pictures and videos and all kinds of stuff, and you're getting entertained, you're getting fed, and you have a more holistic experience as part of your entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand you're also author of several books, including your latest, which is Superfoods, the Food and Medicine, and also the Longevity Now program. Let's talk about how people can actually find out more about maybe accessing those. Tell us a little bit about those books in themselves.
Okay, well, the Superfoods book just came as a solution to a problem that I had seen, which is, what are people actually going to do? What's easy? And where are we actually at with this whole nutrition technology? And when I say technology, I mean where's the leverage at? And we can all operate a blender. That's one of the most amazing things, actually. And with a simple blender, you can blend your way to heaven with these superfoods. Same paradigm as before. You have water, a banana, blueberries. Throw it into a blender, and instead of throwing in like these super weight gainer stuff or Slim Fast or whatever, we throw actual foods in.
Yeah, real food, really.
Real food. And not only that, this is like the realest food on the whole planet. It's the most powerful food in the world. And so then we start getting information from the food that we never got from any food we've ever eaten in our life. Mm-hmm. And that's because these are, the goji berries #1 in Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. My God, I don't want to ever know what number 70 is. Who cares? Let's have #1. That's just getting real. As we develop our skills with a blender or with whatever it is that we do, there's no end in sight as to how far this technology goes. It just continues to go forever. It's not for everybody, right? Some people just go, look, just give me the baseline stuff. That's all I need, and really that is probably what most people need. But when we really get into beyond that and go into the sophistication of where we can really go with this peak performance nutrition fine tuning, it goes as deep as the fitness industry or even further.
Yeah, and it's amazing because you're talking about things that we've actually covered on this show in different ways. One of them is it was a family that's actually in Oregon, for instance, and they talk about going green. In other words, doing exactly what you said is, you get a banana, you get some really healthy deep greens like kales or mustard greens, throw a little bit of water there, maybe some pineapple, whatever. You blend it and you just drink it as it is versus, juicing it and then leaving everything else behind except for the juice. And it's just quite incredible how simple that is. And really, when you have something like that for breakfast, that beats hash browns, eggs, pancakes, and sausage, which I like. But I always find that when I'm finished eating a meal like that in the morning, the first thing I want to do is go back to bed versus having something like what you're talking about where you feel light, you feel full, but then you really just don't feel like eating for a while at the same time.
Right, and you can charge into your day, and it gives you a certain level of inspiration when you have a little bit of info about the food too. When I get people going on raw chocolate, which is one of the great superfoods of the world, the raw cacao nut. This is really heavily featured in my Superfoods book. This nut is the most widely eaten nut in the world, but we don't eat it. We eat a processed form of it. It's called chocolate.
Right.
Right? I mean, what kind of food does chocolate come from? Well, this is, in my opinion, the greatest food in the history of the world. It's cacao or cocoa, and it's a nut, and you can eat that nut just as it is, just like an almond, just like you'd eat a walnut or something. This food is the number one source of magnesium of any food in the world. It's number one in antioxidants of any food in the world. It's number one in chromium. It's number one in iron of any plant food. It's very high. It's very likely the highest natural source of manganese, which is something that helps to support iron and blood oxygenation. It's extremely rich in zinc and copper. It's so rich in minerals that if you take a raw cacao bean and grate it, like with a cheese grater, into pieces and then run a magnet over it, it will magnetize like iron filings.
My goodness.
I've seen two foods in my life that do that. One of them is kelp powder, which is a seaweed, which is really rich in minerals, and the other is chocolate, actually the raw chocolate and cacao.
You know, and the other thing you're talking about, too, is you can incorporate that, as you were talking about earlier, about making, you know, a nice little breakfast blender drink or even a lunch blender drink. But you can see how you begin to, as you slowly incorporate this into your diet, would you say that what you've seen people actually experience is the fact that those things that they used to crave and like, for instance, it could be a burger, it could be cookies, do you see them just saying, yeah, I just don't feel like I want it anymore?
Absolutely, because here's what I'm seeing. This is why the Superfoods book came about. It's just we defaulted into Superfoods because it produces the results. Here's the result: when you start taking superfoods, let's say it's a morning blender drink, and you throw a bunch of superfoods in there. Let's say it's maca, goji berries, raw cacao, and marine phytoplankton, which are four of the most powerful superfoods on this earth. And you blend that into your banana, blueberry, water, whatever it is. And you go about your day. What ends up happening is you feel so good and so light and so high, and your neurotransmitters are all firing, that very quickly you start saying, my God, maybe I should do another one. Maybe I should do 2 a day. And
become a rocket man.
Yeah, totally. And then that leads to 2 a day. And then pretty soon you're like, well, you know, what should I eat for dinner that would really kind of keep this feeling going? And then that naturally matriculates into healthier choices. You know, it takes a lot of work. Unhealthy choices take a lot of work, and healthy choices actually don't take any work. However, we never were taught that. We were taught the opposite, right? We're taught that, healthy eating, it's all trouble and all kinds of problems and whatever. When, you know, I don't even barely need to do dishes. I don't have to scrub any pots and pans. You know, it's so simple with a simple blender. I've had a doctor who I work with, Dr. Gabriel Cousins, argue with me on this. He says you can't blend your way to heaven, and I'm constantly in disagreement with him about that. I think you can blend your way to heaven.
Interesting. I believe you can too, because you're actually taking food in its raw state. And I think that's the most important thing that people can understand, and we've talked about this on our program many times, is the common sense about diet and nutrition is if you have to go to the store and you have to buy something that somebody's put into a box and you have to make it, then you're already several steps behind in how your health is going to turn out in the long run versus how you would naturally find a food in its state out in nature. And that's where you start.
That's a very important it's a very important theme in all of nutrition, that the more natural the food is, the better it is for you, the better the effects are on your body, and the better you feel moment to moment.
Mm-hmm. Now, David, even though we're running a little short on time here, let's talk about vitamins and what you would consider to be the one that people are most deficient in, because you constantly hear, well, it's usually vitamin C, you know, that we're most deficient in. Get as much of that in your body as you can, but what is it really, and how can we get more of that into our diet?
Okay, well, let's just talk about the B vitamins for a second, then we can get to vitamin C, because B vitamins are more problematic for more people. We're deficient in B vitamins due to the stressful world that we're in. B vitamins are water-soluble and heat-volatile, so, you know, with a lot of cooked food, for example, you can miss out on a lot of B vitamins. Vitamin B6, vitamin B3, and vitamin B12, and vitamin B9, in that order, are where we need to focus on. So let's talk about B6 for a second. Best natural source of B6, there's 4, actually. Number 1 is goji berry. 2 would be spirulina, which is a superfood algae. 3 would be bee pollen. I just had the local bee farm down the road here just delivered a bunch of that this morning. My God, I instantly felt energetic effects from it. B6 is very deeply involved in energy production in our body. And then royal jelly, which is the super longevity food that is produced for the queen bee that you can get from bee farmers, is another excellent source of B6. B3 is found in all bee products. It's found in bee pollen. It's found in royal jelly, but it's primarily, actually, this is very interesting about vitamin B3. The primary best source of it is peanuts for most people, for most of us. And this is one of the reasons why, like when you're a kid, peanut butter becomes like kind of a staple food because it has to do with neurological brain formation and the proper neurotransmitter production of our nervous system, that B3. That's what B3 does. B3 has been known to fight schizophrenia. It's been known to fight depression. It's a very important nutrient. The best peanut that is out on the market is called the Amazonian jungle peanut, and it is available online. You can shop for it. Just Google Amazonian jungle peanut, find that out there. And what a great peanut! And it's just, peanuts in general are vastly underrated food, but then again, they're very unclean in the way that they're shipped and processed in America today. Vitamin B12, probably most meat today is once it's been cooked and by the time it gets into our body, it's deficient in B12. Same with dairy products. In the natural world, the best source of vitamin B12 would always be insects, but we don't get that because that would just be naturally on our vegetables like aphids and stuff. We don't get those homeopathic elements in our diet anymore because we're not eating stuff out of the farm. So probably the best thing if you're pregnant, elderly, really need something, but you're not sure what it is to get on a vitamin B12 supplement just to make sure. That's one of those areas where you want to have a little bit of an insurance policy, even if you're a meat eater or a vegetarian or whatever. Most pregnant women are deficient in vitamin B12, and that's really problematic and dangerous for, building an embryo and building the baby and the fetus up.
Mm-hmm.
And then B9, best natural source of B9 is folic acid, by the way, is what that's called, is bee pollen. Bee pollen. I'm a big fan of bee pollen because it's probably the most natural superfood to any ecosystem. As soon as you have bees collecting pollen for honey, you have a bee pollen source in any ecosystem in the world, and you're getting your B vitamins.
And here it is that we're facing an alarming trend where bees are slowly disappearing.
We are facing I'm a beekeeper I have a farm in Hawaii, and so I'm not there right now, but when I'm there, I get into the hives, and I'm very familiar with what's going on with the bee industry. It's really, there's mites and viruses and all different kinds of things that are invading different bee colonies, and it's very, very troublesome because without bees there is no food.
Right.
And so this is something that we're all learning about, and this is one of the reasons we got to get away from chemical farming, because chemical farming, especially nicotine-based pesticides, appears to be the primary culprit of what's causing these problems with the bees.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me, David, because you're in this industry and you're so steeped in it, do you see that turning around where the big corporate agri-farming is starting to turn around and almost hopefully dissipate to where we're seeing more of the smaller farms, more of the super organic farms sprouting up where people are taking more and more responsibility? Because, everybody loves to point their fingers, all those greedy corporations, but you're the one that took the step that supports what they're doing. And until you step in a different direction, the only person you need to blame is yourself for letting them get that big in the first place based on your demand. What do you see? Do you see it changing, and do you see really hope when it comes to the food industry?
I'll say this, I guess, about the food industry, is that the big corporations and that level of consciousness, it is only going to be changed by a change in our demand.
Right.
And I think you're right on the money.
Which is what I just said. Yes.
Just what you just said is right on the money. Mm-hmm. I definitely see an explosion, an absolute explosion in people's interest in gardening, farming, getting connected with local farmers, getting connected with local farmers markets. That area of the industry is it's unbelievable compared to where it was 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm. The reason I bring that up, it's so funny how people just don't remember, and especially the young today, don't remember what food really tastes like in its natural state, even when you get it from what you believe is a natural state. And not too long ago, we had someone on who is a gardener, and we're talking about gardening for food and gardening for pleasure. And we got on the subject about tomatoes, and I thought to myself, I remember when I was a kid, and I bit into a tomato the way that it tasted then. and how it is now, and it's just amazingly how different it was. It didn't have that tomato smell or taste like it did when I was a kid, and you look at it now, and it's like a gross byproduct. It looks like a tomato, but is it really?
Yeah, that's probably one of the best examples that we could pretty much bring up at this point. Mm-hmm. A homegrown tomato, you feel the love. I mean, period. You just
taste
feel
it too, and smell it, and see it.
Yeah, and it's like, wow, what is this? And it probably one of the first things that happens for people when they really become food quality experts is that they stop buying any kinds of tomatoes from grocery stores, right, and start seeking the heirloom stuff, the farmer's market stuff, or growing their own.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. So go ahead, David, and give out a website where people can find out more information about how they can become better educated about what they're doing, because really when you get armed with information, you then have choices. And again, everybody can go ahead and point their fingers at the big greedy corporations and so forth. The fact is they only exist because you've made a choice to support them by buying from them, by creating the demand for it. And it's up to you as an individual to be able to change that. Hallelujah.
The best way to find out what I'm up to, just from the schedule perspective, if I'm going to be in your town, I'm a public speaker by trade, on top of being a nutritionist, and I love doing shows, is to go to davidwolfe.com, which is WOLFE.com, or you can find out more about like free content and longevity and the stuff we're doing in that field at longevitynowprogram.com.
Now, I'm sure you've been asked this question a dozen times, but how did you get the middle nickname Avocado?
This is funny. About 15, 16 years ago, when I first really decided that this was going to be my vocation and career, we thought we would come up with something like a superhero kind of alter ego thing. And I had two other guys I was working with at the time, and my cousin, who's one of them, he said, how about Fats Avocado is your name? Like Fats Domino, but Fats
right,
Avocado.
Right.
And I was in Southern California at that time in Avocado land, and it stuck. The fats part dropped off, but the avocado part stuck, and that's how I've retained that name. It's kind of like a superhero name, right? There's Clark Kent, and then there's Superman. Everybody has to have this kind of alter ego if you're doing work in the world that's really about saving the world, and it also makes it a lot more fun. It certainly does. Well, David Avocado Wolfe, we want to thank you for joining us on the program. Go ahead again and give your website information out. Thank you very much. It's davidwolfe.com, WOLFE.com, and longevitynowprogram.com. Very good. Well, David, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. It's been very liberating, I'm sure, especially for our listeners. Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun, and to everybody out there, have the best day ever. You bet. Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. Be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com with the number 50 with a 50. And be sure to sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Also visit us at our blog where we archive our information as well as our shows, so that way you can listen to them at your convenience. Also pass them on to friends and family as well. Again, thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.